Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. New political party Rise Mzansi has been working to engage South African communities, both rural and urban, since its founding in April of last year. Together with South Africans, the party travelled, interacted, listened and co-created its manifesto, which has been named the People's Manifesto. Joining us to tell us more about the process is Irfaan Mangera, who's part of the National Leadership Collective of Rise Mzansi. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Some bold promises were made yesterday. I mean, we know that the hopes here are to get 7.5% of the vote in the upcoming elections. How are you planning on doing that?
Thanks so much for having me, Mpo, and good morning to all those watching in. I think Rise has an opportune moment in this election, given that we have seen the complete division around South Africa's politics, whether it's the MPC on the one hand or the ANC on the other. And I think when Songeza spoke about the third way a couple of weeks ago with JJ Tabane, he introduced the idea that South Africans have options, have an alternative that they can get behind. And part of that alternative is how we get the citizens who are disillusioned about politics and about the system to get involved and exercise the democratic right to vote. And so we're seeing a lot more energy coming from society in which people feel like they're tired of waiting around and want to actually make the change. And so Rise has been saying the only way we do that is if we step up as the leaders of society in all our spaces, whether everyone from a civic organization to academia to business. You all have a role to play, and you have to be the leader who takes us out of it. We can't wait for the same old politicians to promise us the same old things. And I think that 7%, in my opinion, can actually be extended given the context that we are in, where so many South Africans feel like they don't have an option, and they're tired of resorting to going to the ballot box and choosing based on the worst option, but the most palatable at the moment. And I think we need to rewrite that script and aim for a higher standard of politician, a higher standard of product and offering that is being given to South Africans. And I think yesterday's manifesto launch of Rise provided that, a new set of leaders with a mix of the intergenerational experiences, but also with ideas that have come from South Africans themselves, not something that we had produced on the sidelines. It has been co-created across hundreds of communities that we've visited in the last 9 months that since we've launched.
A lot, in fact, a big chunk of those potential voters are young South Africans, some who have said that they are eligible to vote but have not done so because they don't feel that there is a party that speaks to their concerns and is able to engage them. How are you planning on attracting some sort of excitement and convincing young people to come and vote for Rise Mzansi?
I think we are doing a decent job. I think it's always going to be a difficult experience engaging that youth cohort who are, frankly, like myself, for 30 years in democracy now, we've not felt that we have been free to be who we are and express and actually access this type of freedom that we are told we have. And so, personally, coming from civil society, I think we've made an impact in that space where young people who we've organized with, who we work with in the development space, have realized that we cannot wait for that change. We have to be that change. And for those, I think the journalists who were there yesterday can attest to the fact that the room was youthful. There was a vibrancy around the young people who were there. Our organizers, for example, many of whom are young people, going day to day in communities, knocking on doors, speaking to people about people's alternatives that now exist. And so it's a mixture of taking politics to people and making sure that politics doesn't become something that is done on the sidelines, but it's something that we recognize as a day-to-day lived reality. If we make politics personal, young people realize that the leadership who is in charge are as responsible as ourselves as individuals, because that's how democracy works. It doesn't work if we only sit on the sidelines and utilize protest. We need to move protest into action, and action into us taking concrete steps to build power and organize power and use that power to actually demand the change we want. And part of that is is holding us as politicians accountable to say, as a bloc, we're willing to vote for you should you actually deal with the issues that we want to see on the ballot box, rather than just the politician. We want to see the issues that you're going to raise and you're going to solve for us.
There's been lots of questions about, how a lot of the smaller parties are coming together, merging to voice their, manifesto and perhaps aligned on certain policies and assertions. Who does Rise Mzansi align with? Or is this a small party that's going out there to achieve a 7.5% vote in the upcoming elections without merging with other parties?
I don't think it's off the table about merging. In fact, a couple of months ago, you would have seen that Rise had merged with a very small party called Move South Africa, a party of young South Africans, led by young South Africans in its entirety. And they had joined us because they share the values and they share the vision that Rise has put on the table for a united, equal, and prosperous South Africa in this generation. And I think defining this generational mission has meant that there are other parties who have political alignment in the sense of our ideological stance on our approach to politics that is grassroots based. But being social democrats, it's about who actually wants to actually deal with the structural issues that exist in society that have been a legacy of colonialism and apartheid. But in a modern context, how do we build and include justice, freedom, equality, integrity, and solidarity in our work? And if we see that, and if we experience that in the physical realm, but also behind the scenes from certain parties, we are more than happy to work with them. And in fact, we've seen that kind of engagement already happen. At our People's Convention last year, we had the Land Party, for example, and the Good Party, for example, speak and give messages of solidarity to us. These are messages and relationships we continue to build because we don't think that politicians and political parties alone have the answers to solve the problems in society. It has to be a collective effort. But we also reckon with the fact that we have to have and build a political alternative that allows us to get there. So we are open to engagements of that nature, but our principles and our values will always be the guide in how we align ourselves. It will not be based on any desire for positions or desire for just trying to navigate and access power. I think for us is a long-term vision for actually changing the way this country looks at politics, but also ensures that the constitution and democracy is the ultimate winner at the end of the day.
In changing the way this country looks at politics, I mean, you spoke a short while ago about the measures that have been put in place to attract the youth vote. And if we have to look at expanding on the demographics and the profile of the kind of voter you're attracting and hoping to sway, who exactly would you say you're talking to? Because we know, with all that's been said about the ANC perhaps being on a decline, but what has been seen over the years is that, the older segment has voted for the ANC and has continued to do so without really being swayed. How are you going to attract that group of people to come to Rise Mzansi?
I think, like many, people have become disillusioned with politics in general. And I think not just when I say this, I'm talking specifically about the political establishment, that being the ANC, the DA, perhaps to an extent the EFF, who are pretty standard in their approach to politics. They've not reinvigorated and introduced how we should approach a new vision for this country. And I think that has left many people feeling, honestly, I was in that same boat, feeling like I don't have a home. I had left the ANC years ago because the culture of corruption was too ingrained. And so even Abogogo and the elderly that you speak about, they're actually also feeling the same feeling. And just yesterday or 2 days ago, one of our National Leadership Collective members, Esther Padi, had gone and engaged the Gogos in her constituency who are saying, we are frustrated and we are so energized by the fact that there are younger people taking up this fight, and we will support you because we need something new, but we're also willing to work with you to achieve that. I do think that the ANC and the DA and perhaps the entire current establishment has lost their sway in what they offer South Africans. Too much of divisive politics and not enough focus on actually dealing with the issues. They focus on factional battles or, quest for power rather than actually going into communities, listening, and understanding how they can actually contribute to solving the problems that exist. And I think RISE brings that, and it also brings it from a lens that we utilize the creative sector, for example, utilizing arts, the type of drama and music that we've produced with RISEs across the country. And I know that there's this assumption that RISE is this clever black organization, and that yesterday in itself dispelled that idea, because you had people, young and old, black and white, Indian and colored, from all across Gauteng's communities. And what this also showed you is that there is a willingness to actually unite people behind a common vision. That actually is the political will we're missing in the politicians today, to stand firm to what they believe in. I want to end by saying that the biggest challenge thus far is that we've not reduced inequality or eradicated it completely from our existence. And for a person like me, growing up 30 years into democracy now, I've not seen that number reduce. In fact, we've maintained that number and it's grown wider. And for us to actually completely change that dynamic, we need to make sure the most vulnerable in society are lifted out of that experience. And therefore, RISE will continuously appeal to that base of people to make sure that the most vulnerable are catered for, and that all of us have a responsibility to act in solidarity, to learn to compromise where necessary on certain issues, and make sure that we put the people first before anything else.